One time I was punished for stealing cookies out of the cookie jar. They put me in the hole. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 scary prison punishments that should be outlawed. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's shut it down. Number 10, solitary confinement. The 8th Amendment itself designates solitary confinement as cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Under international law, many lawyers have argued that it is also the kind of cruel and unusual punishments prohibited by the 8th Amendment. Proving this to be the case, however, has been a difficult task for attorneys at every level of the court system. The lack of clarity of the 8th Amendment has raised questions with the use of solitary confinement that specifically constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. In light of the serious, long-lasting psychological effects of solitary confinement, inmates have argued that the mental injuries they suffer qualify as cruel and unusual punishment. Prison officials contend that placing inmates in prolonged solitary confinement is necessary for various reasons. Some of these reasons include separating violent prisoners from the general population, separating vulnerable inmates from others, and punishing those prisoners who attempt to cause riots or try to escape. Prisoners argue, however, that the nature of these kinds of offenses does not justify the use of solitary confinement. In their eyes, there is simply no strong security need for the total social isolation that exists at some supermax prisons. Number 9, flogging. Flogging, also called whipping or caning, is a beating administered with a whip or rod, with blows commonly directed to the person's back. It was imposed as a form of judicial punishment and as a means of maintaining discipline in schools, prisons, military forces, and private homes. The instruments and methods of flogging are varied. Children in schools and homes have been beaten with sticks, rods, straps, whips, and other objects. Elsewhere, the lash was widely used, usually with pain-inflicting elaboration as in the cat o' nine tails. This was constructed of 9 knotted cords or thongs of raw hide attached to a handle. The Russian knout, consisting of a number of dried and hardened thongs of raw hide interwoven with wire, the wires often being hooked and sharpened so that they tore the flesh and was even more painful, which involved blows delivered to the soles of the feet with a light rod, knotted cord, or lash. Flogging was formerly executed with great brutality. The backs of the condemned were frequently lacerated, and salt was poured into the wounds to increase the pain. In England, the Whipping Act of 1530 authorized the whipping of thieves, blasphemers, poachers, men and women guilty of minor offenses, and even the insane. Victims were tied to the end of a cart until the 1590s, when the whipping post was introduced. Flogging is abolished in most countries, but some of them still authorize it. Number 8, the Drunkards Cloak. Now, this one is already outlawed, but you guys need to hear this. A Drunkard's Cloak, or Schandmantel, was a type of wooden barrel used in several countries for the punishment of miscreants, in much the same way as stocks. Drunkenness was made a civil offence in England by the Alehouses Act 1551, or an act for keepers of alehouses to be bound by recognizances. The Drunkard's Cloak, sometimes called the Newcastle Cloak, became a common method of punishing recidivists, especially during Cromwell's reign, during which he suppressed many of England's alehouses, particularly in royalist areas, and the authorities made regular use of the cloak. An early description of the Drunkard's Cloak appears in Ralph Gardner's England's Grievance Discovered, first published in 1655. A man in Newcastle claimed to have seen men drove up and down the streets with a great tub or barrel opened in the sides with a hole in one end to put through their heads, and to cover their shoulders and bodies down to the small of their legs, and then closed the same, called the New-Fashioned Cloak, and so make them march to the view of all beholders, and this is their punishment for drunkards or the like. What a weird thing. Number 7, tattoos. Tattoos were actually a punishment at first in Japan, and they were huge. The association between tattoos and crime in Japan dates back to 1720, when criminals would be branded with permanent markings in highly visible places, such as their foreheads and arms, to serve as a punishment for nonviolent crimes. The content of these markings varied depending on the region where their crimes were committed. In Hiroshima, each crime resulted in a new tattooed line, so that after 3 were committed, the offender bore the kanji markings for dog. During the Edo period, tattoos became popular within the lower and working class until the first national ban on tattooing was introduced in 1872. This ban was said to be influenced by foreign perception of Japan and the government's desires for conformity and rejection of primitive practices. In Okinawa, hand tattoos, hajichi, were connected to female shamanism, and between 1899 and in 1904, nearly 700 women were arrested for breaking the tattoo ban. However, in mainland Japan, approximately 500 people were arrested for tattooing from 1876 to 1946. Instead of destroying the budding tattoo industry, it only drove tattoo artists underground to avoid arrest. Number 6. Public shame. In November 2012, Sheena Harden, 32, was ordered to hold up an embarrassing sign on a Cleveland, Ohio corner. Municipal Judge Pinky Carr ordered Harden to 2 days of standing on a corner during rush hour traffic holding a sign that said, "Only an idiot would drive on the sidewalk to avoid a school bus." Harden pleaded guilty to failing to stop for a school bus while children were getting off. Harden's license was also suspended for 30 days and she was ordered to pay $250 in court costs. Judge Carr said she hoped the unusual sentence would remind other drivers to have patience for the school bus. Public shaming has a long history as a form of punishment in both Europe and the United States. Nathaniel Hawthorne depicted the role shame played in Puritan New England society in The Scarlet Letter, writing, "There can be no outrage, methinks, against our common nature, whatever be the delinquencies of the individual, no outrage more flagrant than to forbid the culprit to hide his face for shame." Some judges have begun taking a cue from the Puritans, sentencing convicts to display their crimes publicly in humiliating ways. While individual judges have received support for the idea, whether shaming is effective at deterring repeat offenders remains to be seen. Number 5. Mandatory church. 17-year-old Tyler Allred pleaded guilty to manslaughter in a Tulsa, Oklahoma court in November 2012. Allred crashed a pickup truck in December of 2011. The passenger in the truck, Allred's friend, John Luke Dumm, was ended in the crash. Allred had been drinking at the time of the crash, and while he was not drunk, he was still considered to have been driving under the influence because he was underage. Dumm's family reportedly reviewed the incident as an accident. His sister, Caitlin Dumm, told the Muskogee Phoenix, "We don't need to see 2 lives wasted for a mistake." Judge Mike Norman was accordingly lenient with Allred's sentence, giving him a list of conditions to meet over the next 10 years in order to stay out of prison. Allred must graduate from high school, graduate from welding school, take substance, beverage, and nicotine tests for a year, wear a substance and beverage bracelet, take part in victims' impact panels, and, most unusually and importantly, attend church for the next 10 years. Allred's lawyers stated the sentence wouldn't be a problem, that her client already attends church every Sunday. I'm glad he was a Christian because if not, this sounds a bit odd. Number 4. Blind. The master of creative sentencing is an Ohio Municipal Court Judge, Michael A. Ciccinetti. Ciccinetti has handed down dozens of unusual punishments over the years, explaining his unique brand of justice to one local ABC affiliate, saying, "Can't stone them anymore. If they learn from it, that's what justice is all about." In one case, Ciccinetti ordered 18-year-old Jeremy Sherwood to sit outside an adult video store wearing a blindfold and holding a sign that read "See No Evil." Ciccinetti was convicted of stealing from the store. Ciccinetti's signature judgment is to offer the defendant a choice between a traditional sentence as well as a creative one more fitting to their crime. In Sherwood's case, the alternative was 30 days in jail. What's the big deal with that? It reminds me of what they used to do in my home country, Egypt. If they caught you stealing, they'd chop the hand you stole with. Number 3. Holding a sign at a busy intersection. Eloise Morels and her husband are preparing to serve a long and unusual sentence. Part of that sentence will be served at the intersection of Westheimer and Post Oak. Morels and her husband will be forced to hold signs there every weekend, declaring their crime in a very public way. While you are on community supervision, and listen closely because you are not going to enjoy this, Judge Kevin Fine said, Daniel Morels and a visibly shaky Eloise Morels stood before Fine as he laid out their punishment. Eloise Morels will serve 180 days in a Texas Department of Criminal Justice facility starting immediately. Both Eloise and Daniel will serve 180 days in Harris County Jail 1 month at a time for 6 years. Daniel starts serving his jail time immediately, while Eloise will start her sentence after her time at TDCJ. The judge also ordered both of them to pay back more than $255,000 of stolen county money in complete community service. Daniel Morels was sentenced to 400 years of community service, and Eloise Morels was given 600. And they have to post a sign in front of their house that says, "The occupants of this residence, Daniel and Eloise Morels, are convicted thieves." Then came the kicker. Public humiliation. The pair must tote signs at the busiest intersection in Houston. "I am a thief. I stole $250,000 from a Harris County Crime Victims Fund. Signed, Daniel Morels. Yours will be signed, Eloise Morels." Fine ruled. For 5 hours a day, every weekend for 6 years. In April, the couple pleaded guilty to stealing more than $250,000 from county funds meant for crime victims. "I'm satisfied with what occurred," Prosecutor Lee Cox said. Number 2, A Night in the Woods. Ohio judge and creative sentencer Michael Ciccinetti again sentenced a 25-year-old Michelle M. Murray to spend the night in the woods with no food or camping gear after she abandoned 35 kittens in a park in 2005. 9 of the kittens passed away and many were found in ill health. Ciccinetti offered Murray several sentencing options. She was given a choice between 90 days in jail for domestic animal abandonment, or 14 days in jail, 15 days under house arrest, or a $3,200 donation to the Humane Society, a $500 donation to the park rangers who found the kittens, and 1 night alone in the woods. Murray chose the woods and served her time in November. Originally, her sentence stipulated that she could have no food, reading material, and only the clothes she wore to keep warm. But due to cold temperatures, Ciccinetti allowed her to build a fire by herself with no materials. Number 1, walking 30 miles. Michael Ciccinetti has been doling out odd punishments for years. His most recent was giving an 18-year-old who skipped out on a cab fare for a 30-mile trip to either spend 30 days in jail or walk 30 miles. A judge can simply follow the law, and if somebody committed the crime, here are possible penalties. Ciccinetti said, "How much of that do I impose? Sure, you can do that and you can go home and you can rest easy. Or you can take each case a little more personal and still apply the same law." His sentences appear to be working. Recidivism in Paynesville is only 10%, which is way below the national average of 75%. When you talk about state prisons and federal prisons, their problems started way back here with my court, with municipal courts with the minor offenses. Most people don't start out with a felony case, Ciccinetti said. It starts small and it gets bigger. So my whole train of thought here is that we have to stop them or prevent them, that conduct, from going further at the beginning stages. They get in jail, they get smarter criminally, and as they get smarter criminally, the offenses become greater. Many who have been sentenced by Ciccinetti said that they are grateful to have had an option other than jail. A woman who pleaded guilty to animal neglect and cruelty after leaving her dog trapped inside a house for a week opted to pick up garbage cans instead of spending 90 days in jail. And a man who pleaded guilty to stealing a bike avoided 60 days in jail by doing 10 days of community service. Honestly, I think Ciccinetti is doing a great service to the entire community. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.